Do you know if there are usage allowances today with broadband service? Yeah.
There are, right,
Comcast has a market trial that has been, I think, 2 years old now.
Yeah,
That has
it's
expanded
gone.
to multiple cities. That is a
250
300 gigabyte usage allowance, and then if you go over that, they charge you, I think, I want to say $10 every 15 gig or something.
Then I can play with FCC.
Did you?
I'm going to.
Well, yeah, you can. However, the way they do these usage allowances will be the same way that they do on mobile. You'll get an email saying, hey, your usage is at this amount. So there will be consumer information provided. I mean, FCC probably would have an issue if there wasn't. AT&T has some data allowances. Verizon does not, as far as I can tell. But that's another metric by which you can define and describe. Part of this is the availability of broadband. So in an extreme corner case, you could have fiber to everybody's home, but if you have a data allowance of 1 gig per month, well, then nobody can really use it, right? So that's another metric to think about.
David,
Yeah.
so we only focusing on residential because you also get into the, because many people work at home now where it's really more of a business application. I've forgotten how we structure our problem, because in some cases, the restriction goes to people in big server farms and they have home, right? And I'm not sure.
Well, you could certainly have a work at home as one of the elements, maybe, or one of your basic services.
We didn't specify residential use.
Because my neighbors, some of them, I mean, they do high-speed stuff out of the house, which is a different.
And there are specific qualifications if you want to receive, if you're a consumer and you want to participate in the Lifeline program, you have to be a low-income consumer, so a business owner might not qualify.
But not necessarily the other subsidies programs.
No, not.
So one other important thing to highlight about the problem, we've been talking about both wired and wireless internet here. For your guys' purposes, you're looking only at wired internet service, right? So we cut down the universe of stuff that you gotta worry about, just the wired services. So forget about wireless. What are you running the problem?
Yes. Okay, so, now advertised speed is another one. So the commission with their measurement platform is really tracking in terms of they advertise a 25 megabit per second service, are consumers really getting this? And the measure there is important in that it's, the way they report it is the percentage of time that actual speeds, so they have a probe, they have a box, it's in each one of these households. That measures the actual speed at the endpoint, that it meets or exceeds the levels during the peak usage period. So it's one thing if they're just doing measurements in 4 or 5 a.m. when the internet usage does trail off. The internet does have a pretty broad peak usage period, which you need to be thinking about in terms of when you dimension a network. You dimension it for the peak usage time. Right? And so the FCC then has advertised speeds as a metric by which they might track. And then you have a couple here that are a little bit vague. We talk about is a network secure as being something that might be a metric they would apply. So as an engineer that's working this, I'm kind of going, huh? How do you measure that? Has anybody got a good idea? What's that? Anybody here in the network security track? Yeah, okay, you guys, you're gonna be, you need to think about this. What's a secure network? I'm not sure, but they throw that out there. It might be something you want to think about. Obviously, if you have networks that are not secure, it'd be interesting if you had a metric about that, because with all the issues about breaches of security, I don't know how our existing network would come out. Right? So, another one is price. So they talk about price, I presume, cost of a subscription. But then is it a price per megabit? You know, is it a price associated with the usage allowance? How much you use price as one of these metrics, or benchmarks upon which you're trying to say the internet is available or not. And do you want the government necessarily to do that, because it has implications then if you're getting these funds that you might have to set a particular price for your broadband service, and is that something that makes sense? That plays into the fears of those in the net neutrality side, who are concerned that Title II will lead to common carrier price regulation. That's one example. Okay, so that's what I have in terms of the slides here, so I guess we're gonna
Let's open it up for
open it up
questions.
for questions.
And I saw somebody snapping the pictures of the slides. We can circulate those to both slide decks to everybody so you guys can have these. These aren't any secret. The only other thing that we haven't talked a lot about, but some of the law students are sitting there wondering, what do I contribute here? And so there's a class that you guys are taking, legislation and regulation is one else, or that you took already. So what's one of the big laws that you encounter there? It's like the main law. Yeah, the Administrative Procedures Act, right? So the engineers over on this side of the room are gonna come and come up with this crazy definition of broadband that you guys are gonna put into place. You lawyers have gotta figure out whether that's consistent with the Communications Act, right? And you've gotta figure out whether the FCC can promulgate that definition consistent with the Administrative Procedures Act, right? You gotta think through, what if somebody comes and sues over this definition? What's the standard that's gonna get used? Anybody know? Yeah, so we're gonna run into the Chevron standard. So you gotta think, how is what we're proposing gonna get evaluated? Is it gonna be judged to be arbitrary and capricious? How can we justify it, right? So you're gonna wanna think of the legal aspects too.
Yeah, so this is a great, are you going with that? A great observation, because Blake and I, if you don't like the problem, you can throw darts at us, but we deliberately chose a problem where you have to have both sides. So don't come in with a solution that just addresses APA or a solution that just addresses some definition or metrics for broadband. We're looking for a full solution. Right? Because in the past, we've had some problems where you can get away with one or the other, and we very much want to set the standard as you gotta work together, you gotta come up with a solution that both sides are happy with. From the technology, the law side, and economics as well. Point.
Risk of appeals. I mean, you'd like to do this, what's the risk of getting sued versus choosing something that may not be quite as good as what you'd like to do, but is more apt to stand up to court review?
Yeah, so
That's what we turn up to, you know, having been there, that's what you often turn to the lawyers for, is, you know, we really, the chairman really wants to do this, but can you do it without too much risk of litigation?
yeah, you guys gotta think about strategy, so that's gonna be the piece that you're gonna bring to the equation is, how is this gonna fare after the FCC rolls it out? What risks are we opening ourselves up to?
So we're operating as lawyers for whatever company or group we represent, right? So they would really contemplate how the FCC's implementation would be, right? Like like Netflix is one of the groups, right? Like they would just, you know, the SEC is gonna have an NPRM or whatever, right? And they're gonna submit their data and suggestions and recommendations, but do they craft those to pass like judicial review?
So this is a great question, and just in case everybody didn't hear it, you're gonna be representing a particular organization, and so I think DIL is gonna go through the specific organizations you've got picked out. So it's Comcast, Netflix, Public Knowledge, and the City of Montrose, Colorado. So each of you guys is gonna be on a team that's assigned to one of these stakeholders, all right? So the question is, are you gonna advocate for policies as representatives of one of those organizations or entities that are gonna survive judicial review, right? So in other words, is Netflix gonna go ask the commission, for a standard of broadband for Lifeline that they think is gonna get overturned on appeal. What do you think?
I don't think they're gonna ask for that. I guess that wasn't clear to me yet, that like, that is even like something that they're sort of considering as opposed to just sort of like, this is the data and this is what we think, like the sort of solution we think you should do, and you're the FCC, so you craft the rule and
So this is a strategic decision you gotta make, right? You could actually go in and say, you know what, there's probably gonna be some other people in this proceeding that are gonna argue the other side of the fence from where I'm at. So I'm gonna argue something really extreme in the other direction, because I know actually where the FCC is gonna come out is probably gonna be somewhere in the middle, right? I don't wanna compromise too much. But we also wanna be mindful of arguing to try to get the FCC to do something that we know is gonna get overturned, right? Because that might not be good for us in the long term. And we're gonna get a kickback to the FCC, then we're gonna have to go through this whole thing again.
Commission
So
just
that's,
may dismiss it, this is a good idea, but it's not within our statute to be able to do it. Where are you then? You're
yeah. And on the flip side, engineers, you gotta play the same role, right? So if the lawyers come to you guys and say, hey, we have read the Communications Act in a way that lets us ask for 10 gigabit per second internet standards. You gotta say, hold on a second, guys. That's not possible in the networks that we're talking about here, right? So you guys gotta reality check each other and decide where your solution is gonna fit, you know, right down the middle so that it's gonna be successful. You gotta think about all of these dimensions. And one other thing I'll throw out on this point, we are really gonna score you, and the judges are really gonna score you on how well you embrace that company's position, right? So this is not about what you think personally. You gotta take that company or that entity's position in mind. And so we've seen in previous years, folks come in and argue a position that if that company took that position, their stock price would tank tomorrow, right? You know, we don't want the argument that's gonna put this company out of business or that's gonna get the mayor of this town tossed out on his head, right? So you gotta think about internalizing how this organization or this entity would approach the problem, right? That's a big part of it. So before I turn it over to Ed Yael to give you guys a little bit of information about the logistics, any other questions you guys have? Yeah.
So to get a viable solution, how can we estimate or factor in our calculation that how much subsidy it is allowable from the FCC? Like we should have a fair amount of estimation that much subsidy we can have, so that we can calculate and get a viable solution. Like, okay, this is our cost and that much subsidy estimation we can have on this service, and also it's a viable solution.
That's a great question. Ed Yael, do you know the number on this? It's $9.25 per household, right?
Yes, the subsidy that a individual can receive, or that a company receives per individual that applies to Lifeline is $9.25. And as of right now, the FCC is,
25 lump sum, or one year?
yeah, per year.
Per year, or?
Yeah.
It's per month.
I'm sorry, yes.
So
You apply,
$9.25.
you apply, if you're a Lifeline recipient, you have to apply each year to continue receiving the subsidy. So it's around
And so,
Am I understanding it correctly? It's $9.25
dollars.
per household or per individual?
That's right,
Per household?
per month,
Per month.
right.
$9.25.
That's what the FCC currently agrees to provide.
Just to add on to it, I mean, does that include the government institutions or charitable institutions? Because, I mean, those are not profit earning bodies. And so, I mean, is it applicable to those also, this Lifeline funding?
As if a governmental institution wants to receive internet service?
Government
No, it's
institution,
for-
government
it's-
schools?
It's only for low-income individuals, and there's specific ways that you qualify for it. I think in the documents we have the FCC's website on Lifeline. If we don't, I'll make sure to email that website because it explains who can receive this, who qualifies for the subsidy. But the subsidy goes to the provider, to the company that is providing you the service as a consumer. They get that money right now,
And
right?
it's awfully important to focus on the, to add to the Lifeline. lifeline there, so it's very easy to get off on these other programs. So focus on the lifeline.
Yeah, so remember from Dale's slides at the beginning of the hour, right, there's 4 such programs, and one of them is E-rate. So if you were representing a school or a library, which you're not gonna do in this problem, you'd be taking a really hard look at E-rate, for example. Or if you were representing an entity that wanted to do rural healthcare, you'd be looking at that program. But here, we're talking about individual consumers.
We had a
Other
question-
questions?
We had a question last year whether they can, students can ask us questions. Will we respond to questions, or if we respond to all students, or what are the rules on getting help from faculty?
So here's the rule,
That's
so.
like volunteering.
That's great, take them on it.
Well, we're volunteering Dale for this. So if you guys want to ask us questions, do so knowing that we will forward it probably in a daily digest through Sarah to the whole group, right? So if you've got some really great insight that you want to keep secret and you don't want to turn over to your competitors, don't send it to us, because we'll answer it, but we're going to answer it to the whole group.
Some of them could be just a factual question, in which case, it doesn't particularly disadvantage you for some of the back.
Do we have other faculty?
Ooh, good question. Yeah, I guess we won't know.
Tell us not to as well.
I don't know, what do you guys think?
Oh.
I say yes.
To make it realistic, I would say yes, Chuck. I mean, that's what happens in the real world.
Yeah, so this is an important part of the lesson here, right? We don't expect you guys to figure all of these issues out yourself. Part of doing this is doing research and finding good sources.
But please don't always all call them error.
There's a great reading list that we've compiled for you to use as resources with a variety of sources there. But if you see, an organization, if you see an individual that you're like, well, I want to know what they think, I would call them up. Also, I will have some meeting hours. If you guys want to go over, if you have any questions, and I can help you with the policy, and I'll have a schedule where you can sign up.
One other thing to say about the reading list. So have they gotten the reading list already? So if you guys take a look at that, there is probably, you could spend the entire next week reading all of the stuff on that list. You do not need to go beyond that reading list if you don't want to. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed by all this stuff, and you think, you know what, I just want to try to get the basics right, start with that reading list and work from there. On the other hand, if you want to get real advanced with your argument, you've got some other creative ideas and you want to kind of kick it up a notch, you're welcome to take it outside of Atlas. So it's totally up to you. Right? So why don't we turn to EdYL to talk a little bit about how the actual competition is going on.
And Sarah's gonna jump in on this as well. So both of us will be able to help you answer some questions about the structure of the competition. So as you've seen, I think you've already been assigned the entity that you will represent. Is that correct? So some of you will represent Comcast, some of you will represent Montrose, the city of Montrose. Public knowledge, does anybody know what public knowledge is?
It's an organization that's protecting net neutrality and other issues like data gaps.
They're a public interest organization, so they're a nonprofit, kind of a think tank that works to advocate on behalf of the public, right? How these issues impact the public and consumers, and so they offer their expertise in that regard. But they're not an internet provider, they're not a city, and they kind of just advocate on behalf of the public. And the other entity is Netflix. So Netflix is a content provider, so they have a very different, they all have different perspectives, right? Comcast could receive the subsidy, they might want to receive the subsidy. Yeah, fixed. They also don't want to participate, maybe don't want to participate in the program at too big of a loss. Maybe they want to get, some good press for participating in this program. But they're a private internet provider. The city of Montrose is a small city in Colorado, right? They might have people that are low income, residents that are low income and can't afford internet service. So you have that perspective as well. They might want to provide internet service themselves, if that's something they want to do. They might want to just advocate on behalf of their residents in Colorado. Public knowledge we already discussed, and Netflix wants people to be online so that people can watch their movies, right? So they have a very different perspective on this. So those are the 4 entities and how you'll approach this policy question. Now to the structure of the actual competition. So there will be 3 rounds the day of the competition. And we can send you a little rubric of what those rounds look like. The first round, every single team will get to present. Oh, before I get there, I should say, what are you going to do in this competition? You're going to write an executive summary of 1 page, and that is due Thursday, November 5th at 5 p.m. You will email it to Sarah. So make sure you do that. That we are asking you to provide it to us by that deadline because for the judges, we want to make sure they have enough time to read your executive summaries. Also, on the day of the competition, you should prepare a 10-minute presentation on your proposal. So that way the judges have the summary and now your presentation to complement how they'll score you.
So let me say a couple of words about both the executive summary and the presentation. So I bet some of you guys are rejoicing and thinking, all right, only 1 page. It's not going to be hard to fill up at all. So it would have been easier for you guys if we'd given you 10 pages, right? Writing a really effective, concise 1-page summary that gets across all your points in a really clear way is going to be difficult, right? So think about what you're packing into that 1 page because that's what the judges are going to read about your presentation beforehand, right? Think about the presentation. Another worry people are probably having, oh my gosh, how do we talk for a whole 10 minutes about this stuff? This is going to be really hard. Wrong way to think about it. 10 minutes is going to go super fast. So some of you guys are going to have 4 people on your team, some of you guys are going to have 5 people on your team.